Hello, so let's get started. Today we will be looking at the writer's effect question, which is question 2 on the first language iGCSE Cambridge paper. Now, every video I upload, I will be referring to the new 2020 paper. The syllabus that my students have been following is the 0500. The 0500. It may well be similar on other papers, and this may well be useful for other exam boards, but I will be focusing specifically on the Cambridge paper, the 0500 syllabus. So the writer's effect question, what does it entail? As a question, it's not changed drastically from previous years. So if you do want to look at past papers, please do so. And after I've uploaded this video, we will begin looking at some past papers and how to apply the 5 steps which I will be teaching you today. But in terms of the differences, as I've said in my first video, it is now worth 15 marks. 15 marks, not 10 marks. So it's so important you get it right. And this is something I say to my students every single lesson. The examiners really want to be able to see students who can engage with the writer's language and begin to show those sorts of higher order skills, those inferential skills, those skills that show that the student is able to unpick the language successfully and make meaningful comments. You will still probably be required to look at a piece of fiction. Usually it's something from a narrative, a short narrative, and you will be directed to 2 paragraphs. That has not changed. You will then be asked to find 3 powerful words or images from both paragraphs. Okay, so that will be 6 in total as opposed to 8 in previous years. This video will very much be focusing on the 5 steps, as I've said before, that I encourage my students to use to ensure that you have a response that is fluid, that is well put together, that is insightful, and that is really focused on the language. And that is what Cambridge want to see if you are to get those top marks, 12, 13, 14, 15 for this particular question. So once you've read the story or whatever text you get, of course the first step is always understanding what you have read. I think some teachers around the world or some students are hardwired to feature spot. So they go straight to the paragraph and they start looking for the metaphors and the similes and the personification before actually understanding what the writer is trying to convey or what they are trying to suggest through their words, through their phrases, through their sentence structure, punctuation, etc. So before we begin to look at the writer's craft, as we call it, we must ensure that we understand what is going on and what the writer is trying to achieve. So once you are positive you understand the text, and make sure you understand the text, because Cambridge are notorious for these bizarre and wacky stories, which I personally love, but I'm not sure students do. You need to think about what the writer is trying to achieve. What is the overall effect of the language? And ultimately, that should be the start of both of your paragraphs. So I encourage my students to use the following phrase: the overall effect of the language. That is for both paragraphs, the overall effect of the language. So of course, what the writer is trying to achieve will vary from text to text. But an example may be that the writer is trying to convey that a character is feeling helpless and there's a sense of the character's desperation. If that is the case, you might end up with a sentence that sounds like this. The overall effect of the language seems to highlight the character's helplessness and desperation throughout the passage. It's really important that you carefully consider what the writer is trying to convey. What type of images are they trying to put in their heads? What are they trying to infer? What are they trying to suggest? And once you have your sentence, that ultimately is going to be your topic sentence, and that will allow you to have a well-focused paragraph, which is very much focused on what the writer is trying to convey or achieve. Step 2 is quite simple. I encourage my students to use what I like to call a transition phrase or transitional phrase. And again, this is just to help the overall structure, the overall fluidity of your response. And I encourage them to simply use the writer begins by. The writer begins by. Now the next step is to use the first quotation which you have underlined, highlighted, identified. That may well be an example of imagery, such as a metaphor, simile, personification, or some sort of sensory description. It may also be a type of sentence or a particularly powerful word that you want to comment on because it has an impact on us as a reader. As a rule of thumb, your quotations should be short, 2 to 3 words max. That will allow you to easily embed those quotations into your sentence, again adding to the overall fluidity of your response. Let's imagine that you've just read a story and the writer describes that a character storms out of a room. Hopefully you can see that the verb storm is quite a powerful word and it tells us a lot about the character's emotions. So, using our transition phrase and then embedding our quotation, we should hopefully end up with something that sounds like this. The writer begins by describing that the character stormed out of the room. Now, step 4 is what I like to call the zoom in technique. The zoom in technique. Now, we can zoom into a technique, the writer's use of imagery or the writer's use of the powerful verb, the writer's use of personification. With my previous example, I'm going to be zooming into the powerful verb stormed. Okay, so we zoom into that word and then we are ready to explore the effect of that word. So you should end up with something that sounds like this. The writer's use of the powerful verb stormed. The writer's use of the powerful verb stormed. The last step, which is step 5, is undoubtedly the most important step. This is where you analyze your chosen word or your chosen technique and you show the examiner that you know how to engage with the language. You understand the writer's craft, you understand what they are trying to achieve. And in order to signpost or to start our analysis off with, we need to use some sort of analytical word or analytical phrase, and some common ones are this shows, this highlights, this emphasizes, this reinforces, this creates a sense of, this creates an image of. You should try and use a range throughout both paragraphs. Putting everything together, you may end up with a sentence that sounds like this. The writer's use of the powerful verb stormed creates a palpable sense of the character's frustration. It's clear to see that the character is feeling da 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 da. And then you would develop your analysis to ensure you get those top marks, ensuring that you explore the different layers of meaning. And we will certainly practice that skill in the next video. Once you've finished analysing your chosen phrase, word, image, you are then ready to move on to your second quotation. And quite simply, all you need to do is repeat steps 2 to 5. Repeat steps 2 to 5. There you have it, the 5 steps to success. In my next video, we will continue looking at the writer's effect question, and we will apply these 5 steps to a past paper question. As ever, if you have any questions, please leave them below. Thanks.